Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're stepping behind the curtain, past the glossy magazine covers and the authorized biographies of, the big financial titans.
Yeah, we're not really here to just retell the success stories. We want to
No.
get into the actual mechanics of how that power was built.
Exactly. We're looking for the blueprint. Let's be honest, often unsentimental strategies built on pure corporate combat, leveraging inside tracks on information and imposing systems with, well, sometimes ruthless discipline.
That's right, because if you strip away the heroic framing, the sort of great man narrative,
Yeah.
you find this surprisingly consistent playbook. It runs across centuries, really.
Yeah.
It's used to systematize market dominance and ultimately consolidate massive wealth.
Think of it as a shortcut, maybe, to understanding how financial and corporate power really gets wielded.
In practice, not just in theory.
So our mission today is to kind of extract that practical manual for empire building. And it's not always pretty, is it? We'll go from, say, 19th century steamboat monopolies right up to modern private equity and even Silicon Valley's walled gardens.
We want to know how they built it, not just what they built.
Okay, let's dive in. Let's unpack this blueprint, starting with, well, sheer aggression. So first up is what our sources call corporate combat. This is really about establishing dominance, maybe even a monopoly, through pretty forceful strategies.
Yeah, the goal isn't just to compete. It's often to, completely eliminate the possibility of future competition. It's about strategic force.
And you can't talk about this without mentioning Cornelius Vanderbilt, right? He seems like a foundational figure here.
Absolutely. Vanderbilt's tactics really set the stage for the whole robber baron era. The sources show how early on he focused on maintaining absolute control over key transport routes.
And not just by owning the best boats, but by actively removing rivals.
Exactly. It wasn't just about having the assets. It was about strategically purchasing the absence of competitors.
Okay, give us an example, like the Hudson River Steamboat Association.
Perfect example. Vanderbilt effectively controlled that association, which had a tight grip on the really lucrative traffic between New York City and Albany. So when they bought the steamboat, North America, from Robert L. Stevens,
Yeah.
get this, they paid $80,000.
80,000 back then.
Yeah.
That's an enormous sum for just one boat in the 1830s.
It really was. But here's the kicker. The real value wasn't the North America itself. They pretty much just parked it. The crucial part of that deal, the reason for the huge price tag, was Stevens's agreement, his promise, not to operate any competing boat on the Hudson River for the next 10 years.
Wow. So that $80,000, it wasn't really for the hardware.
Not at all. It was the price of exclusivity. It was buying a decade without a serious, competent rival on that route. Pure market control.
And there's a psychological aspect too, isn't there? The sheer audacity. Like when he broke his own agreements later on.
Oh, yeah. That story is something else. When his deal with the navigation company became inconvenient for him, he didn't just, apologize or offer to pay a penalty.
No. What did he do?
He argued that their separate dealings with some third party had somehow magically absolved him of his own promises.
Sort of.
And then he proposed arbitration. But not to figure out how much he should pay them in damages,
Let me guess.
but whether they should pay him damages.
That takes some serious approach. Confidence bordering on arrogance, maybe?
Definitely. And you see that same kind of unyielding approach, that personal intensity, when he went after Joseph L. White.
Ah, the Nicaragua transit route guy.
Right. The sources describe an exceedingly bitter personal hostility between them. They weren't even speaking to each other. White was actively trying to undermine Vanderbilt within the accessory transit company.
And White made the mistake of boasting, didn't he? Something like, I am the Nicaragua Transit Company.
He did, basically daring Vanderbilt to challenge him. Big mistake.
So Vanderbilt's reaction wasn't like negotiation.
Not a chance. It was total war. He focused all his energy, all his resources on taking over White's last stronghold, that very accessory transit company.
So it became personal. Corporate combat turned into a personal vendetta to achieve what? Total dominance?
Undisputed control. Eliminate the rival, own the field. That was the Vanderbilt way.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. The Industrial Revolution picks up steam, and we get to John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil. The weapons change, right? Less about boats, more about finance.
Exactly. The financial plumbing itself becomes the weapon. Rockefeller's use of the drawback. I mean, it's kind of genius in a ruthless way.
I'd heard of rebates, but the drawback sounds different, more insidious.
Oh, much more. One contemporary actually called it an instrument of competitive cruelty unparalleled in industry. So Standard Oil got big rebates, yeah. sometimes up to 50% off freight rates for their own oil shipments. That's the standard rebate, a huge advantage already.
Okay, standard rebate, I get that. Cheaper shipping for them, but the drawback, explain that.
Right, the drawback was the masterstroke. Standard Oil members got an additional rebate for every single barrel shipped by their competitors.
Wait, they got money back when their rivals shipped oil?
Yes, they were literally getting kickbacks on the competitor's business volume. The sources give an example. Standard Oil got a 40-cent rebate for every barrel a rival shipped to Cleveland.
That's unbelievable. So Rockefeller knew exactly how much his competitors were shipping, where they were shipping it.
Real-time market intelligence, basically.
And those competitors were unknowingly subsidizing Standard Oil's lower prices.
Precisely. It gave Standard Oil unmatchable pricing power. And think about the information advantage, that asymmetry. If you know your rival's costs and volumes, and you're secretly getting paid based on their activity, you can undercut them surgically. You can squeeze them out market by market.
Wow. It's like playing poker when you can see everyone else's cards.
And they're paying you every time they bet.
Yet somehow Rockefeller managed to frame all this consolidation in like almost benevolent terms.
He did. He pitched Standard Oil almost like a public service, a cooperative venture. He'd tell rivals the current system was chaotic, wasteful, unsustainable. He urged them to join forces.
And the pitch was basically,
take Standard Oil stock and your family will never know want. He presented it as this rational, almost merciful escape from the brutal competition that he himself was orchestrating.
consolidation as salvation, not conquest.
And the scary thing is, for many small refiners getting crushed by the rebates and drawbacks, it was probably the best option financially. Taking the stock, surrendering their independence, it often beat going bankrupt.
Financial inevitability wrapped in a velvet glove.
You could put it that way, yeah.
Okay, so connecting this thread of ruthlessness to, say, the modern era, we move from railroads and oil to high finance, private equity. The tactics evolve again, right? It's less about physical goods, more about huge pools of capital.
Absolutely. And the scale and efficiency are just staggering compared to the old days. Think about a firm like Blackstone, one of the giants.
Okay.
Our sources point out they have a relatively tiny staff, maybe around 1,000 employees globally.
1,000. That doesn't sound like much for a global player.
Right. Compare that to an older investment bank like Goldman Sachs, maybe 30,000 employees or more.
Yeah.
Yet Blackstone controls these vast industrial and real estate empires.
So how do they do that with so few people?
It's the model. It's hyper-efficient capital deployment. It relies heavily on leveraged debt and very sophisticated financial engineering, rather than needing huge teams for day-to-day operations management. They buy companies, install new management or directives, optimize finances, and often sell them later.
And this whole leveraged buyout, or LBO model, where did that really take off? KKR often gets credited, right? Kohlberg, Kravis, and Roberts.
Yeah, KKR is central to the story. They famously left Bear Stearns after a big blow-up with the CEO there, Céline Lewis.
What was the issue?
Lewis apparently thought LBOs were an unrewarding diversion. He just didn't see the potential.
So why were the established Wall Street firms kind of blind to this? What did KKR see that Lewis didn't?
Well, the traditional firms saw themselves as bankers, advisors, underwriters. LBOs looked messy, operationally intensive, maybe too risky. They involved taking control of companies, not just advising them.
Right.
KKR spotted the asymmetry. They realized many public companies were, frankly, poorly managed, and their valuable assets were undervalued by the stock market. So the genius move was realizing you could use the target company's own assets as collateral to borrow the money needed to buy the company. Then you could go in, shake things up, improve performance, maybe sell off some parts, and potentially make massive returns.
Using the target's value to fund its own takeover.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And once KKR and the other big players started raising truly enormous funds, billions of dollars.
It couldn't just do small deals anymore.
Exactly. They needed scale, they had to hunt bigger game. Buying a $500 million company just didn't move the needle enough. They needed deals financed on a much, much grander scale.
So the sheer size of the capital forced them into bigger and bigger corporate combat situations.
Absolutely. And the sources say the success of an entire multi-billion-dollar fund could ride on just one or two really great investments, like buying a company, say UKAR, at just the right moment, at the bottom of the market. Nailing that timing could make the whole fund a huge success and attract even more money for the next fight.
But these big funds, these external aggressors, they often need a way in, right? An internal weakness in the target company.
Oh, definitely. Corporate combat isn't always purely external pressure. Sometimes the target company practically invites a takeover through its own internal chaos and dysfunction.
Like the House of Gucci story, that sounds like a prime example.
It's almost unbelievable. The sources paint this picture of Gucci family meetings. It sounds less like a boardroom and more like a battlefield.
Wow, so?
Family members would literally sit in opposing factions around the conference table. Aldo Gucci and his sons on one side, his brother Rodolfo and nephew Maurizio on the other. Constant infighting.
Wow. Not exactly a unified front.
Not even close. And even when Maurizio eventually wrestled control, the chaos didn't stop. The company was bleeding money, lost nearly $30 million at one point.
Ow.
It got so bad, an advisor apparently had to sit him down and say, basically, look, Maurizio, you've got charm, you've got style, but management, maybe not your strong suit.
A tough conversation.
And this internal mess created huge vulnerability. Investcorp, the firm that had bought a stake, was getting hammered. They'd recently overpaid massively for Saks Fifth Avenue, $1.6 billion.
So their investors were already nervous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now Gucci was tanking. The pressure was so intense, Investcorp had to send one of their own executives to Milan full-time just to try and impose some control over Maurizio. The internal family war opened the door for external financial intervention.
And this kind of internal vulnerability, this infighting, it's not just a family business problem, is it? It happens on Wall Street, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even firms known for external aggression can be eaten up from the inside. Look at Lehman Brothers before its collapse.
What was the dynamic there?
Bruce Wasserstein, a top banker himself, supposedly observed that Lehman partners seemed to think their main competition was each other inside the firm. They were constantly battling internally.
As opposed to focusing on rivals like Goldman Sachs.
Right. Goldman had its sharp elbows. But there was maybe more of a sense of collective purpose against the outside world. At Lehman, the internal warfare was legendary.
And that kind of culture can be disastrous during leadership transitions, I imagine.
Hugely. Think about the saga at Sumner Redstone's media empire, Viacom CBS. The battles over succession were brutal.
With CEO Les Moonves.
Yeah. Moonves was reportedly maneuvering hard for total control, pushing back against the roles of other key executives, driving his own agenda.
And it didn't end well for him.
No. And the sources suggest he made a critical error, not being fully truthful, even with his own lawyers, during the power struggle. It shows how that internal focus on crushing rivals can lead you to self-destruct.
So maybe the first principle here is that controlling your own house, maintaining internal discipline, is just as crucial as fighting external battles. You can't give your opponents an easy target.
Well put. Vulnerability often starts from within.
Okay, so we've covered the sort of physical and financial force. Section 2 shifts gears a bit, looking at how powerful players use information or the control of information. Secrecy, managing perception, influencing regulations, sometimes outright deception.
Right. This is all about creating an information edge and asymmetry. If you can control what the public or the market or maybe even the government knows, or crucially what they think they know, what they believe, that gives you a massive advantage. Often invisible, but very powerful.
And a really potent modern example of managing perception to shield a business has to be the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma, right, with the opioid crisis.
A textbook case, sadly. Their strategy involved this incredibly meticulous long-term public relations campaign. The goal was essentially to build a firewall between the family name and the product generating their immense wealth, OxyContin.
How did they do that?
It was an explicit strategy. Make sure the Sackler name was constantly associated with positive things, philanthropy, donations to museums, art galleries, universities. Get the name on buildings.
Ah, the philanthropy halo.
Exactly. While simultaneously working very hard to keep the family name out of any negative news coverage related to the opioid epidemic and the company's marketing practices.
And did it work?
For a long time, remarkably well. The sources say it made the actual source of their fortune seem obscure and distant to most people. They successfully separated the name from the controversy.
And when questions were raised, their main defense was?
Always pointing to FDA approval. They used that regulatory green light as a shield, essentially arguing, the government approved it, how can we be blamed?
Leveraging the regulator's stamp.
Even though behind the scenes there were deep concerns, even within the FDA itself, about how aggressively the drug was marketed and how the risks were downplayed. One official later called the destigmatization of opioids, which Purdue helped fuel, one of the great mistakes of modern medicine.
So regulatory approval was used to deflect ethical questions, basically.
It highlights how powerful entities can navigate and sometimes manipulate the regulatory environment and public perception to obscure really serious underlying problems.
Now, contrast that slow, deliberate, decades-long PR campaign with something like Theranos. That was all about speed, hype, and, well, deception built right into the core product promise.
Right. Theranos is fascinating because the gap between the vision sold by Elizabeth Holmes, this revolutionary blood testing technology, and the actual reality inside the company was just immense.
What was the reality? What did employees say?
They described the Edison machine, the magic box that was supposed to run hundreds of tests from a finger prick,
Yeah.
as basically nothing more than a pipette fastened to a robotic arm. Something a middle schooler could build in his garage. That's a direct quote. The gap between the Silicon Valley hype and the actual engineering was enormous.
And there was a fundamental scientific problem, too, wasn't there, with the small blood samples?
Yes, that was the killer flaw. To make the machines work at all with those tiny pinprick samples, the blood had to be diluted so much. But diluting it that much made the signal, the thing they were trying to measure, incredibly weak and noisy. It made precise, reliable measurements basically impossible for many tests. The core concept was flawed.
So how did they keep the illusion going for so long?
Secrecy, hype, and controlling the narrative. But eventually, the internal panic became undeniable. An inspection report finally blew the lid off.
What did it show?
Hard data. It revealed that out of 250 tests Theranos offered, their proprietary Edison machines were only actually used for 12.
12 out of 250.
12, all the rest. They were secretly being run on standard commercially available blood analyzers from other companies. They faked it.
Wow.
But because Holmes controlled the information flow so tightly, projected this unwavering confidence, and courted powerful connections, she kept the money and the myth alive for years. It's pure information control as a business strategy.
Okay, shifting from, say, technical deception to using raw financial power to shape media coverage. Let's talk about Dhirubhai Ambani in India. That's a pretty stark example of media leverage.
Extremely stark. The sources describe this one incident that just lays it bare. A major newspaper printed a single paragraph that was critical of Ambani's company, Reliance. Just one paragraph.
And Ambani's reaction?
Immediate and brutal. Reliance canceled all of its advertising with that newspaper instantly. Pulled the plug on a major revenue stream for the paper.
Just like that. And the effect?
Predictable, sadly. The newspaper buckled almost immediately. It was forced to print a very long and favorable article about Reliance shortly after, purely to get that advertising money turned back on.
So it was a direct transaction. Positive coverage in exchange for advertising dollars. No subtlety there.
None whatsoever. It's using financial clout as a direct tool to control media narrative.
And this influence extended beyond media into politics.
Absolutely. There's another story where the Bombay police were literally about to raid a warehouse, a go-down, that contained proxy forms, crucial evidence in a corporate power struggle Ambani was involved in.
Okay, so the police are ready to move in.
30 minutes before they were scheduled to execute the raid, the whole thing was called off. The order came directly from the office of the Maharashtra chief minister.
Political interference to protect corporate interests.
Clear as day. It really highlights how, in some economies, political connections, guangxi, as it's sometimes called, become paramount. Success might depend less on innovation or efficiency and more on navigating the political and regulatory landscape.
Right. One scholar even called it technologyless industrialization, where the real competitive advantage isn't tech, it's who you know and how you work the system.
Exactly. The state isn't always just an obstacle. Sometimes it's the playing field itself.
But sometimes the state is the adversary, and that conflict can actually fuel action. Like with the Koch brothers, right? Their political activism seems deeply rooted in their own battles with regulators.
That's a key point. Charles Koch's turn towards funding libertarian causes wasn't just an abstract philosophical choice. It was sparked by very direct negative experiences with government regulation.
What happened specifically?
Koch Industries faced federal charges for violating oil price controls. They were also cited for overcharging about $10 million for propane gas. These weren't small things.
So getting hit by regulators spurred a counterreaction.
A massive one. That anger, that sense of being unfairly targeted, directly led him to pour resources into building a political counterforce. He transformed his family's private foundation into the Cato Institute.
America's first big libertarian think tank.
Right. Explicitly designed to argue against government overreach, to push for deregulation, to change the very environment that had allowed regulators to come after his company. Government action against him created the funding for a movement designed to curb future government action.
Interesting dynamic. Conversely, you have figures who use the government's fear or constraints to their advantage,
Yeah.
like Howard Hughes buying Air West.
Oh, Hughes was a master manipulator of situations like that. Air West was in deep trouble financially, losing huge amounts of money daily, maybe up to $100,000 on some days.
Basically circling the drain.
Pretty much. And this financial crisis actually helped Hughes. Why? Because the government regulator, the Civil Aeronautics Board, or CAB, was terrified of a major airline just collapsing. That was politically unacceptable.
So the CAB's fear of failure gave Hughes leverage.
Exactly. They needed a buyer, any buyer, to avoid the airline folding. Hughes knew this, and it strengthened his hand immensely in the negotiations. The government's desperation forced them to accept terms they might otherwise have rejected.
He played on their institutional fear. But for Hughes, wasn't the ultimate goal always something more personal than just the deal itself, like taxes?
Ah, yes, taxes. Hughes had a lifelong obsession with minimizing his tax bill. It apparently warped his business decisions significantly.
How so?
The sources suggest he would literally choose a deal that made less profit if it resulted in him paying less tax overall.
Seriously, give me the number.
Okay, hypothetically, faced with a deal making $10 million profit but requiring $4 million in taxes versus another deal making only $5 million profit but requiring just $2 million in taxes.
He'd take the $5 million profit deal.
Reportedly, yes. Because his personal priority wasn't maximizing the company's pre-tax profit. It was minimizing his personal tax payment. It's a fascinating, almost pathological focus on one specific variable.
A very personalized definition of financial success, driven by tax avoidance above all else.
It really shows how these figures operate within their own frameworks, prioritizing different metrics of control and success.
So whether it's deception like Theranos, media control like Ambani, or manipulating regulators like Koch and Hughes, the information edge is about controlling the variables, managing perceptions, and ensuring the narrative, and often the state itself works in your favor.
Or at least doesn't work effectively against you. It's about shaping the reality others perceive.
Okay, so we've got the brute force, the corporate combat, we've got the information warfare, the control of perception. But empires aren't built just on aggression and secrets, right? They need structure to last.
Absolutely. Section 3 is about, you could say, the nuts and bolts. It's about imposing disciplined systems, figuring out how to scale operations massively, and the crucial role of a leader's often uncompromising vision.
This is where the founder maybe transitions from being just an entrepreneur, relying on their own smarts, to becoming more like an architect, building something replicable.
Exactly. It's the shift from personal brilliance to scalable systems. The key is standardization, removing human variability as much as possible to ensure consistency and control.
And the poster child for this has to be Ray Kroc and McDonald's.
Without a doubt. Kroc understood that the goal wasn't just selling burgers. It was building a system that could sell burgers reliably, everywhere. Repeat business had to be based on the system's reputation, not just one good experience at one store.
Consistency is key. The fries have to taste the same in Topeka as they do in Tokyo.
Precisely. And Kroc achieved this uniformity through, well, a kind of clever psychology. He didn't just dictate methods, he provided franchisees with preparation techniques and operational systems that were demonstrably better, faster, cheaper, more efficient than anything they could likely come up with on their own.
So you get compliance because the mandated system is actually superior. It makes them more money.
Right. You overcome resistance by making your system the obvious best choice for the operator's own bottom line. You align their incentives with your need for uniformity.
Okay, now shift that standardization idea to retail. Sam Walton and Walmart. He also built a massive system, but he combined it with a really smart niche strategy, didn't he?
He did. Walton's initial strategy for Walmart was incredibly simple, almost counterintuitive at the time.
What was it?
He decided to put his discount stores in little one-horse towns, places with maybe fewer than 5,000 people. These were the exact markets that the big players back then, like Kmart and Gibson's, were completely ignoring.
Why ignore them? Too small.
Yeah, they thought the volume wasn't there. Walton saw an opportunity to be the only game in town, or at least the dominant player, right from the start. Go where the competition wasn't.
Underserved markets. And he paired this geographical focus with intense operational discipline.
Oh, absolutely.
Ugh.
Even as Walmart grew into this behemoth, the management focus stayed incredibly granular. They discussed sales figures in minute detail, often focusing on the performance of a single store compared to its single main competitor in that specific small town.
Like, how are we doing against the local guy in Dothan, Alabama or Harrisburg, Illinois?
Exactly that level of detail. It kept everyone focused on efficiency and winning those small local battles, which then scaled up nationally.
But that efficiency, there was a labor context too, right?
Yes, and it's important to acknowledge that. Early on, Walmart managers did get profit sharing, a piece of their store's profits, which was quite motivating.
But the rank and file clerks.
Walton himself admitted they were paid as little as we could get by with, which, to be fair, he noted was pretty much standard practice in the retail industry at that time. But it highlighted how minimizing labor costs was often a core part of achieving that legendary efficiency.
Right. System efficiency often involves cost control, and labor is a big cost. Now, jumping to modern manufacturing and technology, Elon Musk presents an interesting twist on systems, doesn't he? Almost an anti-automation moment.
Yeah, it's a fascinating paradox. Musk, this high priest of technology, had this major realization, particularly during the struggles with Model 3 production,
What was the realization?
that maybe you shouldn't automate everything right away. He concluded that automation should come last in the process design. First, you question the requirements, you simplify, you delete unnecessary parts or steps. Only then, after the process itself is optimized, do you consider automating it.
So don't automate a bad or overly complex process. Fix the process first.
Exactly. And this wasn't just theoretical. The sources described this incredible scene at the Tesla factory.
What?
Staff were literally sawing robots out of the production line and throwing them into the parking lot.
Seriously, sawing them out.
And they even cut a hole in the side of the building just to get some of the bulky, expensive automated equipment out faster. Because it turned out, in some cases, the excessive automation was actually slowing things down, making the system less efficient, not more.
So de-automation became a necessary step towards efficiency. That's wild.
A powerful lesson. The most complex system isn't always the best. Sometimes simplifying, even removing technology, is the right move.
This idea of needing total control over the process, whether it's automating or de-automating, it links directly to visionary leadership, doesn't it? Like Steve Jobs and his famous insistence on a closed ecosystem.
Oh, absolutely. Jobs was all about what he called the coherence thing.
The coherence thing.
Yeah, that was his justification for Apple's walled garden, controlling the hardware, the software, the whole user experience from end to end. He wanted Apple to be responsible for the whole user experience.
And he contrasted that with rivals like Android.
Vigorously. He called Android a mess, pointing to all the different versions, the fragmentation across different phones. For Jobs, that lack of tight control led to a worse experience, even if it meant Android captured more market share overall. Quality, as defined by him through control, was paramount.
And that drive for control, for his specific vision of coherence, it caused friction, right? Especially early on.
Huge friction. Jobs himself later said, quite candidly, "I never yelled at anyone more than I yelled at Scotty."
Scotty being Mike Scott, Apple's first CEO, his early sort of boss or regent.
Exactly. It shows that the visionary leader, obsessed with their particular vision of perfection and control, can be incredibly demanding, difficult, even abrasive, to ensure that vision is executed exactly as they intend.
We see a similar kind of intense, personal, hands-on control even in philanthropy with George Soros.
Yeah, Soros is another fascinating example of applying a very specific personal operating style to a different field. He ran his Open Society foundations much like he ran his hedge fund.
How so? Like based on his own calls?
Yeah. Entirely. He famously avoided having a traditional board of trustees making the big decisions. Why? He believed trustees managing someone else's money would inevitably be too cautious, too timid.
Too worried about fiduciary responsibility to take big risks.
Precisely. Soros wanted the flexibility to make bold bets, just like in his trading. So he kept the decision-making power tightly centralized with himself.
And how were the foundations funded? Did he endow them?
No, another parallel to his trading. They weren't endowed. All the expenses, all the grants came directly out of his own pocket year by year. He decided how much to bet on various causes each year.
Wow, that creates a very different dynamic than a traditional foundation.
It certainly did. It led to this very energetic, sometimes frenetic pace within his network. Initiatives could get huge funding quickly, but sometimes priorities shifted fast, leading to what insiders called flavors of volunteer month.
Flavors of the month. Short-lived enthusiasms.
Sometimes, yeah. But it also meant he valued execution. His highest praise, apparently, was reserved for doers, people who got things done, showed tangible results, not just talkers or planners.
Yeah.
Very results-oriented, driven by his personal judgment.
Okay, one last example of system and vision, Henry Ford. He built the ultimate manufacturing system with the assembly line, but he also understood the system of celebrity, hype.
Oh, Ford was way ahead of his time on that. He grasped very early on that publicity wasn't just noise, it translated directly into sales. He understood the power of image.
What was his famous quote about publicity?
Something like, "It is a good thing to keep people talking about him no matter what they say." He courted attention constantly.
And he cultivated a specific image, right, the simple, down-to-earth guy.
Masterfully. He presented himself as the plain-spoken, rural-raised mechanic, the farm boy made good, even as he was building this massive, modern industrial empire.
Why was that image so effective back then in the early 20th century?
Because America was changing incredibly fast. Urbanization, industrialization. It was exciting, but also scary for a lot of ordinary people, especially those with rural roots.
So Ford's image was reassuring.
Exactly. This seemingly simple, trustworthy, relatable figure was leading them into this complex modern age, building the very machines that were transforming their lives. It built trust, and crucially, it sold cars. It was perception management layered perfectly onto production efficiency.
Control the factory, control the image, control the market.
That seems to be the formula. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow, okay. That was quite a journey through the playbook. From Vanderbilt literally buying his competitor's silence.
To Ray Kroc buying their operational economy through systems they couldn't beat.
From Rockefeller wielding invisible financial weapons like the drawback.
To the Sackler family building that meticulous PR shield around their name.
So if you had to summarize the core elements we've seen across all these examples, what would they be?
I think a few things stand out consistently. First, the relentless use of asymmetry, whether it's financial leverage, better information, or controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
Second, this strategic ruthlessness in corporate combat, in M&A, that stretches from 19th century monopolies right up to the scale of modern private equity.
And the third thing.
The defining trait of these leaders seems to be an absolutely uncompromising vision, often quite singular, executed through highly disciplined, often brutally efficient systems, whether it's manufacturing, finance, or even philanthropy.
And you mentioned earlier that this kind of intense ambition and consolidation often tracks with big economic or technological shifts.
Yeah, historically, the rise of these super elites often happens during periods of major disruption and revolution. And we see echoes of that in things like CEO pay. Remember that stat. By 2005, the median CEO pay was already 110 times the average worker's pay.
Up from maybe 30 times back in the 70s, a huge divergence.
Massive divergence. And arguably, we are smack in the middle of another one of those revolutionary shifts right now, maybe the biggest yet, driven by AI and automation.
Which connects back directly to the systematization and efficiency themes we just talked about.
Exactly. And the potential scale is mind-boggling. Our sources estimate that technically, we might be able to automate something like 40 to 50% of existing jobs in the U.S. within the next 10 to 20 years.
40 to 50%, that's staggering.
Mm.
So let's bring it back to the patterns we've discussed. We've seen this historical tendency among these powerful figures to prioritize profit, efficiency, system control, often above other considerations, even when they eventually turn to philanthropy.
Labor is often viewed as a cost to be minimized, and inefficiency to be systematized away.
So if this massive wave of automation really hits, what are the likely consequences based on that history?
Well, the immediate consequence could be a much larger pool of unemployed or underemployed workers competing for fewer traditional jobs. This would likely drive down wages for many, pushing more people into precarious part-time or gig economy work, often without benefits like health insurance or retirement plans.
Which brings us to the final, provocative thought for you, our listeners. Given this history, this pattern of prioritizing efficiency and control, often at the expense of labor when this monumental challenge of mass automation truly arrives, who bears the responsibility? Who will look out for those left behind by this next great wave of corporate and technological consolidation?
It's a huge question. And based on the playbook we've explored today, relying on the architects of that consolidation to solve the social fallout, well, history suggests that might be wishful thinking, something to definitely mull over.